What happens when a man is handed absolute power and chooses not to use it for himself? Not out of fear, not out of weakness, but because he believes discipline is greater than domination and wisdom is stronger than war. He wasn't a tyrant cloaked in gold, not a puppet moved by senators, not a man intoxicated by legacy or applause, but a soul quiet, sharp, forged by study, hardship, and long nights of silence. At a time when emperors were chosen by bloodlines or blades, when thrones were seized through war or inherited through betrayal, one man stepped forward who didn't hunger for conquest. He didn't crave a crown. His ambition wasn't to rule, but to restore something lost. His name was Julian. History remembers him as Julian the Apostate, a label handed to him by those who couldn't understand a man out of time. But those who look closer see something deeper. Julian the Philosopher, the last pagan emperor of Rome. A ruler who believed the soul of an empire could be saved not by armies, but by wisdom. He wasn't born to reign. He wasn't groomed for power. In fact, his early life was a testament to survival. As a young boy, he watched his family torn apart, victims of political slaughter within palace walls. He was left alive not out of kindness, but because no one feared the quiet boy who loved books more than battles. They thought he would fade away, disappear into academia, harmless and forgettable. They were half right. Julian did turn to books, but not to escape. To prepare, he buried himself in the words of Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, Ammucten, and Plotinus. He didn't just study Stoic philosophy as theory. He absorbed it as a way to endure, to focus, to rise. While others pursued gold, fame, or comfort, Julian pursued clarity. He honed his mind with discipline. He trained not his sword, but his reason. And in time, that quiet preparation turned into unexpected leadership. When the army lifted him up as emperor, he didn't greet the moment with grandeur. He didn't see it as a prize. He saw it as a test of whether a man formed in philosophy could survive the temptations of absolute power, and for a while, he did. Julian slashed the imperial budget. He rejected lavish banquets. He ate the same food as his soldiers, slept on the same ground, walked in the same dust. He refused to isolate himself in marble palaces. He surrounded himself with debate, not flattery. One general once muttered, "The emperor sleeps less than the guards." Because Julian wasn't there to be served, he was there to serve reason. He once wrote, "Govern yourself before you govern others." That wasn't just a quote for speeches, it was a vow he lived by. In a world where rulers were often ruled by their own emotions, Julian believed the greatest defeat wasn't at the hands of an enemy, it was being conquered by your own anger, your own desire, your own ego. He believed the real battlefield was internal. And when civil unrest threatened the empire, Julian didn't resort to paranoia or mass executions. He didn't weaponize fear. He took the long road, marching across Europe with his troops to resolve conflict not through blood, but through balance. And when power finally settled into his hands completely, he didn't turn to revenge. He turned to restraint. Let us show that philosophy can rule as effectively as ambition. He said, just imagine that. A man with limitless authority choosing simplicity over spectacle, humility over dominance, virtue over vengeance. Even in matters of religion, his decisions, though controversial, were rooted in principle, not force. Yes, he turned away from Christianity, but he didn't burn churches or persecute believers. He believed that true faith, like true philosophy, must be chosen, not imposed. And though he tried to revive pagan traditions, he did so through argument, not violence. In an age sliding into dogma and division, Julian still believed in dialogue. But perhaps his most stoic moment, the moment that revealed the depth of his character, didn't come in victory. It came in death. In 363, Julian was struck down during a campaign against Persia. As he lay bleeding, surrounded by frightened soldiers and uncertain advisors, The empire trembled, but Julian didn't. He didn't cry out. He didn't curse the gods. He didn't scream against fate. He simply accepted. Some say his final words were, "You have won, Galilean," a quiet nod to the Christian faith he had resisted. But underneath those words was something more powerful than surrender. It was acceptance, the very essence of Stoic philosophy. Because to live well, the Stoics say, is to die well, with dignity, with peace, with the kind of stillness that no chaos can touch. Julian died the way he lived, clear, calm, composed. He didn't leave behind monuments of marble or centuries of peace. He didn't rewrite the history books with conquests, but he left behind a question that still echoes today. What would leadership look like not when driven by ego, but when guided by ethics? He believed the greatest empire a ruler could conquer was himself. And perhaps that's why we remember him, not for how long he ruled, but for how he ruled. Because in today's world where leadership is often loud, self-serving, and consumed by image, we need his example more than ever. Stoic philosophy reminds us that real strength doesn't come from domination, but from self-mastery. It teaches that even in high positions, even when pressure is crushing, clarity and character matter more than charisma. It calls us to return to the fundamentals: discipline, virtue, humility. Julian didn't wear stoicism like a badge. He lived it. And his life reminds us that real power is silent, that restraint is strength. That intellect sharpened by integrity is the most dangerous weapon a man can wield. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by politics, by chaos, by uncertainty, remember Julian, not as a forgotten emperor, but as a quiet force. A man who chose to rule with thoughtfulness, who proved that philosophy isn't weakness, it's resilience. He's proof of what Seneca once wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." Julian proved himself. In silence, in hardship, in sacrifice. Now the question turns to you. Will you rule your own life the way he did? Will you meet your responsibilities not with resentment, but with virtue? Not with noise, but with calm, not with force, but with courage. Because the empire you lead might not be Rome, but it's yours. It's your mind, your emotions, your daily choices. And if this story stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Reflect on it, share it. And above all, live it. For more stories where ancient wisdom meets modern challenge, subscribe to Stoic Leadership Insights, a place where Stoic philosophy becomes a compass for everyday leadership. And remember, sometimes the quietest leaders leave the deepest echoes, when they lead not from the throne, but from within.